All right, welcome to another episode of the Why Influence podcast. Today we got an awesome guest. His name is Michael, and he's got a YouTube channel called Creator Fundamentals, where he talks all about, starting your YouTube channel, optimizing your channel, and creating a bunch of content. Oh, did I pull? All right, well, Michael, you want to tell me a little bit about what your channel's all about?
Hi. So I have the Solopreneur Hour channel, and I also have my Wrench YouTube channel that is all about vintage Porsches.
Yeah, okay. My bad on the intro there. I have your Instagram pulled up, but the YouTube I clicked from the last guest. I apologize.
I was like, wait, did I just start a new YouTube channel that I didn't know about?
I guess that's the first time I've made a mistake live streaming, so there's a first for that.
Things happen live sometimes. It's all right. So would you rather talk about so my Wrench YouTube channel is all about vintage Porsches, and it's the thing I've been really heavily focused on. And then I have my Solopreneur Hour channel, which was based on my own podcast, which is called the Solopreneur Hour. Right. That one, I don't put a ton of effort into, but I podcasted for so long. And I know a lot about the gear and about the hosting techniques.
Yeah.
That I don't, I put a few videos up there and people like those, but I'm not putting like a ton of effort into those videos. Although I will be. I have some stuff coming up in 2021 that I'll be probably focusing a little more on that YouTube channel than I am now. But It's been fun. It's been fun creating content, even if sometimes it feels like it's going nowhere, and putting it out into the ether. Hopefully inspiring people to do some of the same stuff that I'm doing.
Yeah, for sure. So what I'll do real quick is I'm going to share my screen here. Let's see, let's add this here. So we got your Solopreneur Hour pulled up. So it looks like you got 10,000 subscribers there. That's pretty awesome for a podcast.
Yeah, all right. Well, it's not a podcast channel. I'm giving gear stuff. Yeah.
Right.
Thank you.
Nice.
And that one, I barely put any videos up on that.
Yeah. And then I saw your Porsche channel. I don't have that handy at the moment.
It's wrench.com/YouTube. You can put it up if you want.
It's all right.
A little chat.
All right. Well, sorry about that. Sorry for the confusion. And as you can see, you got to start ugly sometimes. And here I am making a mistake here on the intro. So sorry about that.
It's all right, man. It's all good. It's all part of the fun.
Yeah. All right. So, before we, jump into your story here, talk about the Solopreneur Hour, and we talk about, your Porsche YouTube channel. Let's talk a little bit about, I guess, YouTube, because you're doing an awesome job on YouTube. I was looking at the Porsche channel earlier, and you've been able to grow that pretty quickly for what it is. So I'm curious, if you were to meet a new person who wants to start a YouTube channel, or maybe just started and they're getting things going, what would be some of the biggest advice that you would give to that person starting out on YouTube?
So I literally just spent the last hour and a half talking about that channel. I had Tom Martin, who's just really one of the world gurus on SEO and keyword research for YouTube channels. He's really just amazing. So we just talked a lot about this stuff. I would say that whether it's a podcast or a YouTube channel, I would say the number one trait to have is patience. Sometimes it really feels like you're in a grind, and there's occasions where sometimes somebody else's channel has done really well right out of the gates. Like they put one video out and it gets 250,000 views and they got 20,000 subscribers. And it can be really frustrating. And that's exactly the scenario that I had been going through. It's like you have this vision and you put all this content out, and then somebody comes out of the blue and really wins the lottery, and you go, but you have to be patient. It was very helpful for me to have Tom on, because he showed me some things with my numbers and my growth that I didn't see myself, in terms of the percentage of subscribers watching videos and things like that are all very good signs that it's going the right direction.
Right.
But patient, you got to be patient over anything. And then strategically, you can sort of fall into 3 buckets. You can decide, I want to do this. Well, maybe it's 3, maybe it's 2, but you can pick a topic that's trending and do videos on that. And then, get somebody else to help you with the external stuff. And maybe it's not something you're very passionate about, but you could get some numbers on some videos. You see that all the time with, there's a bunch of weird, like, tool DIY things that are on YouTube where guys like, watch this amazing tool be made. And it's some guy like barefoot in Thailand making a video with a welder and all this stuff. Well, it's got like 5.5 million views on it. You're like, how on earth did this do this? Because ultimately the thing they make is not that useful, but man, do they have that dialed. Like that is a killer, And then there's someone like me who maybe has a much smaller pool to draw from, but I'm really trying. Like I'm putting nice videos out and making the presentation good and doing good editing and trying to be a good host and doing all the things right in the hopes that the quality will eventually catch on, and so I'll get these loyal viewers, which I feel like I have now. Right. I just haven't won the algorithm lottery yet, but it's coming. Like I call it the hit song. You have to be patient waiting for the hit song to like skyrocket you. But until then, you'll take 3 subscribers a day and you just go and go and go. And it can be a real grind sometimes. So I think patience is probably the absolute number 1 trait to have while whether you're starting a podcast or a YouTube channel.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, definitely takes patience. And I've heard oftentimes, if you get overnight success, you can also have just as much overnight failure. Maybe they get those 20,000 subscribers, but they haven't done the hustle that is necessary to, keep the momentum going. So then maybe the reason of that video isn't something they're motivated by. So then they tend to just sort of die off, as opposed to, if you're there to grind and grind and grind, you're doing it because you care about it and you're able to push through. And in the long run, I've seen that, that sort of works out better in the long run from my experience.
Yeah. It's worth noting too, that like, when you put enough good content out in the world, people feel compelled to buy from you when you have a product to sell. So if you have a t-shirt, you're doing merch or whatever, or you have a product that is, let's say you're into magic and you have a whole magic YouTube channel. If you put out your first like branded deck of cards,
right,
you'll probably buy them because they just support you. You put out all this good content. One more thing I just thought of, and this is super important, especially with podcasting, but really both. It's very important to realize that the second you put content out to the world, you've recorded your podcast, you've done your 7 episodes, you're launching on day 1, or you've done your YouTube channel, that you are now in the media. You can literally get, I don't know if you can see this. Those are either events that I've spoken at or events that I've got media passes to. And that's because you are now, as a content creator, treated as media. So that's fun. It's fun to get a free pass to something cool, some conference, but it's also worth realizing that you are now in competition with Netflix and Google and cable television and talk radio and NPR. And like, that's why I'm so hardcore about, I have a course called The Art of the Interview that's all about how to be a great podcast host. And I think it's the key. I think it's the key element. It's one of the reasons why my podcast has 10 million downloads, is that people realize that when they listen to it, that there's no drop off from having their A-lister favorite celebrity interviewed to the interviews that I do, because I've studied the art of the interview. I've studied the art of being a host and a presenter. That's a term for me that I've recently adopted, because I have friends that are like some of the biggest car show in the world, that they are presenters on that. And I go, that would be a good gig. I would like to do that. So why don't I treat my own YouTube channel like as much as I can, being a one-man show, can I present this just like I see on, Motor Trend television and Discovery Channel and Velocity and things like that? So can I pull that off somehow? So that's what I try to do.
Yeah, so that's how you're approaching content, is through the presentation style, from a mindset standpoint, so that you can have the mentality that you're going to be operating, producing content like what you would be consuming in a professional manner, typically.
If the CEO of Discovery Channel happens upon one of my videos, I want him to go, "This guy's good. I like this. I like what he's done here. What's his team like?" And someone goes, "Oh, it's just him." And he goes, "What? Why are we spending $350,000 an episode on this show when this guy's doing it for nothing all by himself?" And by the way, my videos aren't as good as what's on Discovery. Conceptually, that's what I'm shooting for.
Right.
The idea is that years ago when I think I did Creative Live in San Francisco, which is a really cool kind of live streamed, digital content creators log onto it. It's at the time it was a really big deal. I said, "The pros are coming, you guys." I think it was 2014. I go, "The pros are coming. Get your S together. Like, be better at your job as a host and as a presenter, because I guarantee you some of these radio and Hollywood and, professional video people are going to start finding our little niche here, and they're going to start getting into it." And that's why you see, like, on the iTunes charts, it's dominated by NPR and BBC. And, these are the big conglomerates because they have real pros that are hosting and editing and doing stuff like that. So we do the best we can as independent content creators. Probably the best example is Joe Rogan, but yes and no, because he was on TV for 14 years before the podcast. Adam Carolla was on, Loveline. He's been on professional radio for 25 years before he launched a podcast. So don't be intimidated that you're not like top 200, because these people are, they went to school for it. They do it for a living,
Yeah. So they've studied it and they've practiced it for many years. So you can't put yourself in the same pedestal.
Yeah, exactly right.
Awesome. So let's say you meet someone who is, I guess you would see it as someone who's around the same level as you, maybe a little bit above, as far as like how long and how deep they are into the whole social media world. What would be some of your like secret sauce that you feel like you're doing different than like a typical person who might be a peer of yours?
I definitely nerd out harder with the hosting side, and the interview techniques and questions, and more than almost anybody else I know. I think there's like one other guy I know that nerds out quite as hard as I do. So like, if somebody asks me like who my favorite interviewers, I can rattle them off right out of the gates. And I don't know that a lot of people put that much time and effort into it. I'll watch stand-up comedy partially because of the comedy, but also because of the presentation and how that person is taking an audience through an energy. And I'm really listening for transitions and them setting up a premise. And as presenters, our number one goal is to make sure that our audience understands the concept that we're trying to relate to them. And sometimes we just deep dive into the technical side without getting them to understand why it matters.
Right.
And then you've got an audience member that's sort of wandering around. I also am adamant that entertainment comes before value. There's no instructor that you've ever had in your whole life that wasn't entertaining first before they taught you the thing that they were trying to teach you. They told you a funny story, or they were engaging in some way, and you were fascinated. And then you listened to, oh, interesting, that's how that relates. That's how that goes. And I think people that are even my peers put too much emphasis on value. Dude, we're going to drop some value bombs in this thing. And then it's just data, which is fine for a couple of shows, but then the audience doesn't come back because they're not entertained. They don't get the whole thing. So I think if you can provide entertainment, if you provide value wrapped up in an entertaining candy shell, And then the exterior of that is personality and likability. So that people go, so I just like, I like hanging out with this dude. I want to find out what he's up to right now. And then whenever I happen to listen to him, I learn 3 or 4 things. That's the recipe for success to me in any niche on any platform.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So you got to be, gravitating them, pulling them in, and then you can teach something to them. But it makes sense that if you're just like articulate, saying points, giving them information, that emotion isn't there to keep them there long term.
Well, a good example is, especially in terms of the empathy side, this works great live presenting in any way, really, or doing any of it. It's fun for the audience to be along the ride with you versus acting like the de facto expert out of the gates.
Right.
So the first time I did stand-up comedy, I had a mentor of mine that says, tell them it's your first time. Just share with them what it's like as your first time. And so I did that. I said, all right, so this is the first time I've done stand-up. So, bear with me kind of thing. I felt the whole audience go, all right, we got you. And they were there for me. So it lowered the expectation bar a lot.
Right.
So then if you're even halfway decent, they're like, that was amazing. That was a really good job, blah, blah, blah. I watched a guy years ago. He was the son. So it was a super successful network marketing company. And it was the big rah-rah event. There's 10,000 people in the audience. And the presenter that was supposed to be coming on stage didn't show up. He was gone. And they have a militaristic schedule. So if somebody doesn't show up, it's a huge problem. Well, they send this dude, Eric, who's the son of the founders of the company. He was probably like 22 or something at the time. And they go, dude, you got to go up and do this piece, And it was like a 15-minute piece, but it's in front of 10,000 people. This guy was not a public speaker. So they throw him on stage with the headset mic and, and he goes out and he's, like a deer in the headlights. And he just starts by going, man, my armpits are sweaty right now. And the whole place erupted in laughter. And everybody was on his side. All of a sudden, they went, oh my God, I can't imagine being the guy that has to walk up in front of 10,000 people, no rehearsal, no presentation experience. So don't be afraid when you're new at a thing to let the audience know that you're new at the thing. Be transparent about it. Like, wow, this is my first YouTube video. Forgive me. I don't know how to edit yet, but it's going to get better. And people go, well, that's cool. What does this person have to say? Versus coming out with like, hey guys, what's going on? And blah, blah, blah. And doing all this stuff. And they go, oh, that was crappy. I didn't like it. And I'm moving on. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So there's no room for growth when you walk in acting like you've been there before, acting like the expert.
Right. Yeah, I like that a lot because for me and in my journey, this whole podcast is purely a self-development project for me, and also to help surround myself by people I want to be around. And so even doing this conversation with you and jumping from a meetup straight into here and not preparing the most ideally, now I made a mistake introducing you, and it's I have to work through that, especially live. So for me that was a little overwhelming for a moment for me. But
so in my Art of the Interview course, I have a full, and I sent you this ahead of time, so you had all my stuff. I have all the person's stuff in front of me in an Evernote. I remember interviewing Guy Fieri, and I messed up his name. And this show wasn't live, but it was I used to co-host a show with Hines Ward, who was a very famous NFL player. And I introduced him on the show, and he said I said Guy Fieri, and he said it's Fieri. And we weren't going to go back and edit it. I wasn't going to redo the beginning of the show, but I was super embarrassed, in front of this professional player and in front of this guy. And I go, and it was that day, that lesson I learned on that show. If I have any questions about how to announce someone's name, I usually go to YouTube, or I go and try to find other interviews that they've done and listen to them say their name. Like, all
Right.
right, now I've got it. In fact, I just had a guy the other day who sent me a car part, and I was going to promote it on my Wrench YouTube channel. And I wanted to get his name. I had his name totally wrong. It's spelled Megale, and I was going to say Magal. And last second, I said, oh, do you pronounce it Miguel? And he goes, actually, it's Magali. And I was like, oh God, I would have totally blown that on the show. So I wanted to make sure I got that right. That is what I'm talking about, though. That's how to be a professional host. Like, that's the kind of stuff we have to think about, because if you're lucky enough to get, at least on the podcast interview side, if you're lucky enough to get an A-lister, you want to have your ducks in a row. You want them to not feel any difference between the interview they just did on CNBC yesterday.
Right.
You want to be just as professional as them. So
that's great advice. Yeah, I appreciate that. And we also had someone say, it's an outstanding idea. So thanks, Michael, for sharing.
I forgot we're live streamed here. So
yeah,
I'm not even wearing pants. So
all right, we'll just stay seated and we should be good. So let's dive a little bit into your story here. I appreciate the advice up to this point. So let's go back to when you started sharing in a large capacity. So, when would you say the beginning was for you to share in a way that's sort of bigger than like your immediate network, like in person, like, scaling your voice in a way? Like, where was the beginnings of that?
Let's see. I would say that happened before. It happened a while ago. The first time I knew I had something was in the mid 2000s. I was an expert downhill and dual slalom mountain bike racer for like 10 years. And I got into the web world in 1994 is when I started doing websites. And in 2001, I took on a pro bono project. Like the Cliff Bar, the energy bar, the Cliff Bar. Mm-hmm. Well, they have the Luna Bar, which is like somehow a female version of the Cliff Bar. And they had this little ambassador team of women called the Luna Chicks. And they were like, they would promote like all kinds of women's advocacy and a lot of like women's sports and Title IX and stuff like that. It was really cool, a cool group. And I did a little website for them. Well, they would do these meetups, these all-girl mountain bike meetups. I lived in Boulder, Colorado. And they would promote them and stuff, and they'd get, 50, 100 women would show up, and they'd do these cool little rides or cool tech tips or something like that. And they invited me to go to one just to be there, be the one male, which I thought was good odds. And I went, and this one happened to be on downhilling and cornering. And I just spent 10 years racing downhill. And I remember we're sitting under a tree in North Boulder Park, and somebody asked some question about, cornering or something like that. And no one said anything. And I'm like, imagine this big circle of women, and there's one girl or two girls in the middle, and they're all circling, and I'm all the way in the back on the outside of the donut. And someone says this question, and it's sort of crickets. And I kind of like, I could probably handle that, and everyone turns and looks. And so then I go to the middle of the donut hole, and I demonstrate what I was talking about. And it turned out that I knew what I was talking about in this case. And everyone was like, oh, wow, blah, blah, blah. And then one of the girls from the Luna Chick says, hey, would you take a group? I go, sure. So then I take this group of like 25 women, and we go on a ride, and I work through some stuff with them, blah, blah, blah. Well, then I was invited then, hey, will you come back next week for this, blah, blah, blah. Well, fast forward, I end up being the lead trainer for the Luna Chicks for like 3 years. We would go to, I would do these women's mountain bike clinics, which was crazy and awesome. And that was the first time that I realized that I had a presenting thing that I was like, oh, I can access this information, and I'm good at relaying, because men learn very differently than women, Whereas with a dude, you'd be like, pedal harder, you pussy. You can't really do that with the ladies. at the bottom of the hill. You got to be much more gentle. And I had to adapt the knowledge I had to the group that I was in. Fast forward a couple more years, and I was really good at social media, and I was in this company that had a bunch of baby boomers. And before I knew it, I found myself on stage trying to teach 2,000 baby boomers how to use Facebook to grow their business. And that really stemmed into this this idea that I had now 20 years of digital marketing knowledge and web and just this broad business scope of launching a bunch of businesses. And in 2012, I was behind the scenes helping this guy with, I launched a podcast called The Kick-Ass Life with David Wood. And I was the whole full behind the scenes guy. And then David was climbing Mount Kilimanjaro, and he couldn't do the show. So I jumped on and did a 45-minute session, just literally hit record, did a 45-minute session on how to use social media to grow your business. And hit stop. And I thought, that was easy. And then all these people emailed. We had a pretty popular show. All these people emailed. They were like, you should do that. That should be a thing you do. So then I launched the Solopreneur Hour. That was February 2013. I launched the Solopreneur Hour August of 2013. And that was 820 episodes and 10 million plus downloads ago. And that was sort of how I got into it. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for walking us through that whole journey there. I want to dive a little bit into the beginnings here. So you talked about the circle of women and you standing in the back, just being like, "Hey, I got something to say." Do you mind just explaining what was going through your head at the time? I mean, you're in an environment where you're sort of the outlier. Were you comfortable raising your hand and saying, "Hey, I'll come up and share," and you're comfortable in front of that audience at that point, or how'd that feel for you? Stepping up and doing that big share.
Well, one thing I also forgot is I was a touring drummer for 10 years. So that I didn't have a lot of stage fright, but I see where you're going with that. Yeah, there was probably a little bit of like, maybe this isn't I have the wrong equipment for this environment right now. But I felt confident enough in the knowledge that I had that it overwhelmed any discomfort that I had, because I think that, and that's really the key. If you know your stuff, you should be able to think about this. If you're creating content, it should be content that someone could say right now, "Hey, go do 30 minutes on stage with no preparation." That should be what your show is about, versus like just something that's trending, right?
Right.
I wasn't super nervous about it because I really knew I had the content dialed. I didn't understand yet about the presenting to that group, but it was quickly apparent as soon as I heard a couple of the questions that I went, okay, this is where I need to start. You adapt to it a little bit. I remember in college, I went to Temple University in Philly, and I rode my bike to school every day. And I show up to a class, and the professor is just calling people to give their 5-minute presentation on whatever. I had not done that at all. I was like, I have no presentation whatsoever. Totally forgot. Ran out to my bike and took the wheel off and took all the stuff I had, and I gave a 5-minute presentation on how to change a flat tire on a bike. It was the best presentation of the day. I got voted the best presentation of the day. It's because I knew my shit. I just know how to. I knew how to. I was working at a bike shop at the time. If there was anything I knew how to do, it was how to change a flat tire on a bike, right? So I think that the nerves and the timing go away because you have confidence in your subject. I'll tell one more story about that. I love that. I was emceeing Thrive, which is one of the biggest entrepreneurial conferences in the world. And I think at the time, I want to say there was like 2,000 people in the audience. And it was a big presentation. It was a big full thing with lighting and a huge stage. And it was a big deal. And I was emceeing it. So I was just bringing everybody on and making sure the thing flowed well. And that was my role at this conference. Well, I was just about to introduce our next keynote speaker. It had a 45-minute slot. And the guy who ran the conference said, dude didn't show up. You got to go do 45. Like, and he said this literally 10 seconds before I was walking on stage.
Wow.
In the time that it takes you to walk out to your car in the garage or on the street, I had to think, what can I present about for 45 minutes? Like, that was nerve-wracking. And frankly, I don't remember what I talked about, but it was killer because I found something that I was an expert at, and I've done a billion keynotes anyway, but I just found something that I knew really well, and I didn't let the moment be too intimidating. And that happens all the time as an MC of an event. Things change seconds before. I remember I was about to introduce someone, and then she saw the thing that was on my cheater monitors, that are right in front of me. And she goes, oh, I changed my topic. I'm not talking about that anymore. And I go, what are you talking about? Again, 10 seconds before I had to go introduce her, based on the topic and based on what we talked about before, I put a lot of effort into the intro and presenting someone in a way that they can win when they are giving their speech. So I have this killer, effective intro that tees up their subject for them so that when they get on stage, all the heavy lifting is done and they just have to get in a rocket, right? That's my goal as a presenter. Well, that's all out the window. So she said, well, adversity. I'm going to be talking about adversity. So I had to think of between the time it took me to open the curtain and walk to the front of the stage, something about adversity. So I winged it. And I ended up giving one of the best intros that I had given because it was all in, I had to think, I needed an adversity story. And then I just did, once I had it, I was like, all right, here's a story. Now I just got to set it up. And so then I just set it up with the structure of an intro. Yeah. Which I'll share with you guys in your audience. Do you know what the last two words of any good intro are?
It's the person's name, right?
That's right. That is exactly right. You never utter their name before the last two words of the intro. So you'll hear all the pros say, my next guest has had 2 Emmy award-winning specials on Netflix. They have a brand new one coming out on August 13th. Ladies and gentlemen, Dave Chappelle. That's how a good intro goes. And break it down. You've edified them. So they've won Emmy Awards. They're one of the best in the business, right? You've plugged them already because any good presenter plugs at the beginning and not at the end. They've got their special coming out. And then you've announced them with fanfare, right? That's how those things should chunk. On my podcast, I like to plug my guests at the beginning, middle, and end. I used to say when I would be on stage asking the audience, how many people make it through the full end of a show? Well, it was 15% or something. And I go, when 99% of podcasters plug their guests? It's at the end of the show when nobody's listening anymore. So, and I don't know what the real number is. I think the real number that Dave Jackson just posted, I think it was 52% make it 75% of the way through a show. So as a host, we're doing a disservice to our guest who's giving their time and effort and energy by only mentioning what they do at the end of the show. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, that's great feedback.
Guys, let's all get better collectively as podcasters, because when the industry goes up, more people will participate. You know what I mean? Yeah.
I'm making a note here. I'm going to switch some things around on my end.
Everybody should do it. Everybody should make a note.
Yeah.
By the way, YouTube, little different. YouTube is a different platform. I don't personally think it should be okay for podcasts on YouTube, but that's neither here nor there. But the YouTube audience is more random than a podcast audience. They'll search for something and then your video might pop up. And if you've got a good thumbnail and a good topic, they'll view it, but they don't know you yet.
Right.
It's not like a podcast where people get to know you over time. So you can't plug your stuff at the beginning of a YouTube video. You want to plug it more towards the end, because you've hopefully earned your stripes by then.
Right.
I have a video that's six mistakes that'll kill your podcast, and that one has a bunch of views on it on my Solopreneur Hour channel. And one of the mistakes is not plugging your guests at the beginning. It's a thing. It's a major mistake for people that are, again, used to being interviewed by pros, and they go, why is this person waiting so long I'm not doing this show just for my health. I want to get my stuff out there, and they're waiting to the very end when no one's paying attention. So they won't come back, and they won't recommend you to their other A-lister friends. Whereas we want to be the people that are like, oh no, we got it. We got you. We want to coddle you, and we want you to feel really good about doing this little video podcast, So when we reverse it, it's this amazing, refreshing surprise for these people that are like, oh, good. I don't have to do all the work and plug my own crap the whole time now. Like, this person's got me. They must. And then they give you their A game. When they realize that you're good at your job, they give you their A game, and the whole show's better. So then more people recommend, oh, you had to listen to this interview. In fact, one of my buddies, Matt Farah, from the Smoking Tire, and I have a number of these. I won't tell you all of them, but when someone says, hey man, how'd you get started? What's your story? He refers them back to my show that we did together years ago. He goes, that's the best presentation of my career that I've ever had. And he's been on a billion shows, know? And so I remember, what's his face? Ryan Levesque, who wrote a book called The Ask Method. We were at Traffic and Conversion last year, and I was running around because I was emceeing it. And he pulled me aside with all these big famous marketer people. He goes, do you know Michael O'Neill? He gives the best interviews in podcasting. And I was like, first of all, best plug ever. Thank you. Second of all, I got to go. And I had to run because I was like literally due to be on stage in a second. But that's the kind of thing that gets you long-term win. Yeah. Is, I got this one person on and you'll never see them again.
Yeah. That's amazing. So we had a couple comments come in. Diane said, it's an interesting story about your journey. So when you were sharing your beginnings, thanks for that, Diane.
Diane. That's a cool little, that's a cool little, what do they call that thing down there?
It's just a banner. It's this is StreamYard.
Very cool.
Yeah.
And what are we live
on? From YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch, and LinkedIn if you have LinkedIn Live.
What are we live on?
Right now we're live on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch, but really most people are watching on YouTube right now.
Awesome. Really cool.
Yeah.
Subscribe to. I am. Where am I right now? I am like 32 subscribers short of 5,000 on my Wrench channel. So if I could plug that.
Yeah.
Wrench.com/YouTube, or just look for Wrench. It's RENNCH. I would like to get over that 5K. I'm going to try to do it today. I'm going to really be relentless about promoting it on all these other.
All right. I'll post it on my LinkedIn and Instagram after this too, and I'll help that.
Plug.
Nice.
Yeah.
Cool. So I want to revisit just real briefly. You shared so much, advice and tips and stories that it was amazing. But I want to go back to just the fact that when you were starting out, what helped you tremendously is just being a subject matter expert on what you chose to speak on, and that helped you overcome a lot of the barriers that it took to get in front of a group and speak and share on this thing. So I just wanted to reiterate that for the audience here, that it's a powerful way to overcome some barriers, is to share what you're a knack at, or what you have experience with.
Talk about what you know. Yeah, for sure. It's awesome. It's a really big deal. It's really helpful. Like if you're someone who wants to start a YouTube channel and you're thinking down the road, well, I'd like to monetize this. It's helpful to know that AdWords aren't the way to monetize a YouTube channel. That's not or not AdWords. Is that right? Google AdWords? Well, where you're just getting advertising, right? Yeah, that's right. You're just getting advertising revenue from them. It's fine. It's good to pay your insurance bill, but that's not going to make you the real money. I was watching what's his butt the other day. He's some big YouTuber. He's got 500,000 subscribers. He's making $4,500 a month with the Google AdWords, which is okay. It's nice. It's like decent mailbox money for anybody. But like he makes way more money with brand deals than he does, like probably 10x more with brand deals. And meaning like in my world, here's a good example. When I had 1,500 subscribers on my Wrench YouTube channel, which is all about vintage Porsche restoration and modification, stuff like that, really targeted niche audience. But that niche audience is passionate and they are not afraid to spend money. Like that's an audience that will spend money on their cars. And they're valuable now. You know, these cars have gone up in value a crazy amount in the last few years. So it's a good, rich, probably literally and figuratively, audience to deal with. But I had a company that gave me an electric air conditioning system to install in my car, and it's $5,000 for this thing. It's like it's a significant chunk of change for this aircon, and so their cost is probably $2,000 or $2,500. But I only had 1,500 subscribers. It's not like I had some million YouTube channel.
Yeah.
So they sent me this thing. I did a 5 or 6 part video series installing this system. Well, dude, they've sold 22 of them from my videos.
Wow.
Trackable, 22 of them, times $5,000 each. So the guy made like $85,000 on his $2,000 investment in my channel. That's a killer investment. So on my side, it tells me, well, I have an audience that'll buy stuff if I put forth the effort. It gives me a ton of leverage to reach out to a company and say, look,
huge. Yeah.
Here's the results. Like I have a very, an audience that loves to purchase and they don't mind spending money on this stuff. So send me your gear or pay me some money, and that was 1,500 subscribers. I'm about to get 5,000. So my thought is that if I can get that channel to 10,000 subscribers, and really, honestly, it's just because of the optics. It's not because of the actual number of subs. I can make 6 figures from that channel. It'll probably take me 3 years, to do it from the beginning. But once it's there, it's like, all right, it's there. Now I can, if my whole job was getting to like go out and tinker with a vintage sports car and then go out and travel around the world and drive them, I feel like that's a pretty good gig. Like, why not?
No kidding. Well, congrats on the progress you made so far. I had a couple people.
That's what I'm shooting for, right? It just takes longer than you want it to.
Yeah.
And thank you.
Yeah. And I saw a couple comments come in of people saying that they'll follow you. They just wanted the link. So I pulled it up and put it in the chat. So you should get at least a couple right now.
I want to see comments.
Let's see. Put it up and we'll follow is what Michael said. We did have a question come in. Do you separate your podcast from your YouTube with regards to the content?
So I don't believe in podcasts on YouTube at all, like period. I think they don't work at all.
I tend to agree with that.
I think that very few people, and again, I'm sorry, but this is just, I got to say what I got to say. Yeah. Very few people want to see talking heads on YouTube. They would rather be walking their dog and listening or doing something else. And when someone has to stop and then now they're paying attention to this thing, I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but I know really popular podcasts that like port their show over to YouTube and they get like 9 views.
Yeah, like nothing.
It's not worth it.
Yeah.
It's not worth it. There's a couple of huge differences. And I'll tell you why. Number one, quality doesn't matter as much on YouTube as it does in a podcast. Meaning like the audio quality and stuff. You can have your phone and be like, hey guys, blah, 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 and do your thing. And, if you're some teenage skateboard blogger, that's fine. Or vlogger, and you can kill. People have 1 million subscriber channels doing that. Hey guys, that does not work on podcasts. It's a much more intimate connection you have with your audience. So you have to be dialed in on that. And then 2, the very thing that people think is the reason why they give great interviews, like you and I are on video right now.
Right.
you think, well, we got this great connection and we can like sync up, and you see body language. You see right now as I'm talking, my hands are going all over the place, like I'm Italian or something. I'm Irish. But you think, oh, that makes for a great interview. When in fact, the opposite is true. When, bear with me on this. When someone says, dude, you got to check out this song, and they hand you a pair of headphones, what's the first thing you do?
They find
you close your eyes.
Oh yeah, true.
You close your eyes. You take the visual away because it distracts from the audio. So any psychologist will tell you that 80% of our communication is sublingual, meaning like you're reading my body language, you're looking at my eyes, you're reading my hands. The audience doesn't get to do that when they listen to a podcast. They're just listening to the audio. So if you and I, so whenever somebody has me on their show, like I block out the audio, or I block out the video. I put a screen in front so I can't see them, because it's less distracting visually to have a story being told. Like I can dig into, I literally just did it right now. Like it's amazing because you can almost hear the difference as an audio only listener when the hosts are seeing each other, when they're not. Because when they're not seeing each other, subconsciously it makes you be a better descriptor and a better storyteller than it does when you see each other. Because there's a lot of like nodding that happens when someone's a listener. So as the storyteller, you go, okay, cool, they've got this. But you might not be explaining something in a detailed enough fashion for the audio listener to get the same vibe you're shooting for. It's really interesting psychologically. So
interesting, yeah.
For fun, do the same show you're doing with live stream, but the next time you do it, block out the video. Like, so keep the video going, but block it out. And when the show is over, think about how the flow was on the show versus what you normally experience. It's fascinating.
Interesting. So you're saying as a trial thing to you block the screen but leave the camera on, and
leave the camera on.
Yes, you're going to be doing that, so you might not be like looking at them. Okay.
Yeah. Because what's happening even right now as we speak is my tendency is to look down at your picture versus looking up at the camera, right? So I could be like this, or I could be like this. So there's a little bit of a subtle difference, and you can see that on YouTube a lot. If you have a camera that has like I'm demonstrating this to you. This is exactly what I'm talking about. I'm going to turn you off. If you have a camera that has a screen that flips out so that you can see it as you're filming yourself, right? You can tell when someone's not looking at the lens of the camera and someone's looking at the screen versus when they're looking at the lens of the camera. So I know right now, because I've got you blocked out now, if I just focus on the green dot on my computer, I'm going to give a better vibe to you and the audience than I would than if I was looking at you. Not only that, but I just had to describe the screen flipping out more than I would if I was just demonstrating it with my hands. Does that make sense?
Makes a lot of sense, yeah.
It's a weird psychological thing. So everyone thinks, oh, I want to be, in person or on video looking at each other. Try it without it and see how it feels. It's really interesting. And right. The last thing I'll leave you with on that is, remember when you were a kid and you had the phone cord pulled into your bedroom and it was 2 a.m. and you were talking to your friend and you had this amazing imagination of content coming from you versus like the kind of things you say when you are right in front of someone. I guarantee you it's not as intimate. Guaranteed.
Awesome. Yeah, I love that. Thanks for going into that. And I would tend to 100% agree that YouTube is not the place for podcasts. The reason that I do it, just for the audience's sake, is because I'm on a journey of self-development and overcoming barriers. And when I started my podcast, I did audio only, and I edited my own self in post-editing every time I asked a question. So I started in a very uncomfortable state, and doing these live streams is helping me overcome my barriers, and I'm spitting out an occasional YouTube video here and there in between. And I could see that long term, I probably won't be doing, the live stream interviews on YouTube, or maybe doing the live stream interviews, but more Q&A style, and then doing the actual interviews on the podcast. But the reasons that I'm using it is not for getting optimal reach or, having these videos go far on YouTube. It's more for getting myself comfortable, overcoming barriers, and self-development for
you're working without a net when you're live streaming.
Yeah.
Which is cool. I do the same thing on my podcast, believe it or not. I've never edited the content of a podcast. I've done 820 episodes. I hit record and I hit stop, and that's what the show is. So when that is in my head and I realize I'm working without a net, it does change how I do the show and make me step up my game.
Yeah, I agree. And also it helps get content out much easier. I found when I was editing in the earlier days, I'd be like bottlenecking myself and having content that's not getting out there because there's tasks to do involved. And I'm like, well, how can I get these barriers out of my way? Because I don't want to not be posting content because of certain things. And doing the live stream made me remove that net, like you said. And then now the raw content goes to the podcast, and it's much easier for me to produce a piece of content as a result.
Well, here's what I would do. I would, the second I hit stop on one of these live streams, I'd break out my little Canon M50 or whatever camera you have, and I'd be like, guys, we just did an incredible interview with Michael O'Neill. We talked about this, and this. In fact, he gave this really great tip on this. If you want to hear the rest of the tips, check it out here, and then link to that podcast episode.
Right.
Because then you have YouTube that's like meant for YouTube. You've actually created content for the platform it was intended. And then you're sending people. And the cool thing about that, by the way, and YouTube in general, is that it's hackable. So you can use some good keywords and tags and, title that thing, the best podcast hosting tip you've ever heard, and they watch that video and go, oh, dude, I totally want to hear that tip. And then they go listen to the podcast. That's how I think YouTube should be used for podcasting.
Yep. I completely agree. I think that's great advice. And I know Michael's getting ready to get his out there, the one that asked that question. So I'm sure this is helpful for him. Actually,
cool.
It is. Thanks.
Any other questions? Do we have a Q&A time or no?
Let's post some questions if you have any questions. We got a couple people here.
Digital marketing, YouTube, podcasting, restoring vintage Porsches. I'm good for all those things. Yeah.
So while we wait for a question to come up, let's talk about your community real quick. So you've got like all these different platforms. You got a couple different brands. Some people manage communities by having community hubs, whether it's groups in certain areas or maybe even just the community that sits on the platform itself. So do you mind just talking briefly on how you manage your community between your brands?
Well, they are very different. They're very disparate. Certainly this year is because we've been so locked down that most of my focus has been on the Porsche YouTube channel because there's nothing else to do. I make most of my income and build most of my community from doing live speaking gigs or emceeing events. So I've done 0 of that this year.
Right.
Well, I did one. I think I did VidFest in Orlando. That was the one conference I did. But one thing I do, here's what I'll say. I don't let a comment on YouTube not go unresponded to. I respond to every single one of and I read every single one of them. So I would say that that's the closest I have to a community right now. I have not put a lot of emphasis on the Solopreneur Hour podcast. I've been doing about one a month versus doing 3 times a week when it was at the beginning, and then 1 week for a while. But it felt very tone deaf to me for most of 2020 to be like, hey, here's some marketing tips when the world was burning. So it just didn't seem like the right timing. And I thought, let me just spend the time in the garage and doing this thing. So I would say that my efforts right now are probably 90% on the Wrench brand. And to cultivate that community, I am responding to every single question that I get. I'm putting a bunch of content out at least weekly, if not more, which is a lot because I calculated every one of my videos takes about 25 hours to do between the research, the shooting of the video, and then the editing, and then the publishing and marketing is about 25 hours per video. So it's really my almost full-time gig right now. And I'm planting seeds. I'm trying to build the infrastructure more than anything. I'm trying to build this thing into when this channel does have, when I put a video out and it gets 500,000 views, I'm ready for it and I'm kind of prepared. So I'm making sure that I'm creating fanatics right now. That's what I'm concerned about. So I'm doing things within the video, just like I talked about, to make it like as entertaining as I can, even for people that aren't car people. And that's really my litmus test. Is sometimes I bring a couple of my lady friends that are like in video. I go, watch this, and what do you think? She was like, I don't know anything about what you just did, but I thought it was a really fun video to watch. And I was like, that's what I'm shooting for.
Nice.
I'm shooting for that. And not because I want to be all things to all people, because I think that's the way to really kill any brand that you create, is to try to be relevant to everyone. If I look at my stats on my channel, I was actually surprised today that I have 97% male viewers and 3% female, because for the longest time, it was like 99.7% men. I'm like, where am I picking up 3% of ladies all of a sudden? Like, how's that happening? Maybe it's my friends that are trying to support, but don't be all things to all people at all. But I think that I learned that lesson from Gary Vee. I think Crush It is still one of the best books you can read in terms of like how to cultivate a good, passionate online community. And it's you got to get in there and respond to everything. I watched this guy a couple weeks ago. I loved his video, and I wrote this really cool comment on it, and he just gave it a heart or a thumbs up. And I thought, I'm never going to watch another one of this dude's videos. Like, it totally turned me off that he didn't give me 5 seconds. Hey man, thanks for watching. I did this. But that's how people think. It's that next level of interaction that you can give to someone. I think this has been the death knell of communication. Just a thumbs up or a like or a heart on someone's. I hate it when people do that to my text messages, when they just give me like a like or a haha or whatever they do on the iPhone. I'm like, I'm never going to send them. I'm literally never going to send them another message because I hate that so much.
All
it's
right,
like the least you can do. Sorry.
Yeah, that's great advice. I got a couple questions that came in.
Yeah.
So Diane, she asked, how long did it take to get to your first 1,000 subs? I know she's working towards that right now. She's probably curious, how long it took for you to get there.
It was I remember that day. Let me tell you. Let me see if I can. 1,000 subscribers. I think I got a little thing from vidIQ. I use vidIQ, by the way. It's a really great tool. vidIQ. It's a great tool. I don't think. Let's see. I had 1,500. I think it was probably like a year, maybe, from the first video. I remember thinking, view wise, I was so excited to get 100 views on a video, and then I was so excited to get 500, and then finally 1,000. And now, like, if a video doesn't do 1,000 in the first day, it's not performing well for me, Yeah. And then I just released a video yesterday that this will be my first video that gets 2,000 in the first 24 hours.
Nice.
Yeah. So I think you should be able to pick up 100 just by promoting it on social media, like just friends. Hey, will you subscribe to this? Subscribe. Then it's a grind to get from 100 to 1,000. And then it's a real grind to get from 1,000 to 5,000. Which is where I'm in right now. Mm-hmm. Unless you get a couple of hit songs on the Solopreneur Hour channel, I've had 2 videos that have run. 250,000, views. And that has made that channel just grow 20, 30, 40 a day. So that went pretty quick. This one was pretty slow, but now actually my wrench channel is outperforming growth, is outperforming Solopreneur Hour, and that has almost twice as many subs. So that one will get 10,000 soon, and then wrench will get to 5,000, hopefully again by the end of the day. If I do it well.
Definitely. Yeah, I'll promote after this as well.
Promote, everybody, promote.
So, Michael asked you, what do you recommend to start digital marketing platform? I'm assuming, I know he's sort of.
I'm not sure what that means. Digital marketing platform.
Yeah, Michael, if you're still there, if you want to clarify that, but I think he's contemplating starting a YouTube channel, a podcast, different platforms. So I think the question is like, which platform would you suggest starting on in today's environment? Would be my impression.
I think the content dictates the platform. So I couldn't do a podcast on vintage Porsche restoration. It just doesn't work. You got to see it. You got to see me welding stuff, Could I do a podcast on like Porsches in general? Absolutely. I could totally do that. But not restoration. It wouldn't make any sense. For one of my podcasts I have one that's all about high-end audio. And I was thinking about that's a great podcast for that. We could discuss some of the techie side and it's really good. But the visual side, I could do YouTube, but it seemed like too much work, but it works really well on Instagram because the gear is very beautiful, So I think the platform's got to dictate. I'll tell you one thing I wouldn't do is another podcast about entrepreneurship or self-development or something like that. It's just I don't want to say that ship has sailed, but man, you're in a hyper competitive industry, especially because of COVID, and everyone launched a podcast this year.
Yeah.
It went up 1,000,000,000%.
Yeah. I think if you're trying to start a podcast in that space and your purpose is to get listeners, then I would agree. If the purpose is to use it as a tool to get conversations with the right people, regardless of if people are listening or not, then there's probably still some value in that situation.
Have Mike tell me what industry. I'll help him break it right down.
Yeah. So what industry?
Yeah,
Michael?
Still there. Tell us what industry you want to do it in.
It says this podcast is well established.
Okay.
He's clarifying with saying which platform for digital marketing.
Kartra. Yeah, Kartra is the bomb. In fact, if you want to solohour.com/Kartra. Even better.
Yeah,
Kartra to me is my favorite. More than ClickFunnels, more than Infusionsoft, more than it's so all inclusive. There's membership sites, video hosting, landing pages, sales pages, email hosting and campaigns. It's all in one thing. And one thing I like about Kartra, that's Kartra, solohour.com/Kartra.
Yeah, use the affiliate link if you're going to do it. You might as well.
Yeah, please do. Yeah. They have great affiliate commissions. But one thing I like about them is it feels like daily, but a couple times a week, they write to us and go, "Hey, we've improved this. We've done this. We've listened to you on this." They're moving so quickly in terms of responding to their audience that it's awesome. So they really are moving and shifting with the industry, which I think is, for someone like a big behemoth like Infusionsoft, they're not it's like the government, man. They're moving slowly, whereas Kartra feels very quick. So Kartra. Sorry, awesome. I didn't mean to I ran away with the platform idea. But if anybody ever has those questions, those are really good questions to ask. And you guys can always find me on all the social medias at Solo Hour, SOLOHOUR, on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook and that.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll put all the links in the description, and we've been shouting out to subscribe to your YouTube channel throughout. And next time I bring you on here, for a catch up on your journey, I'll make sure to give you a shout out in the beginning, mid, and middle based on your feedback. But now that we're here at the end, do you mind telling people where you'd want them to go?
Well, so as your podcast coach, would you think that would be my job or your job to do?
Now that you're asking me that question, then I think it's my job.
So I do a little quick, when I first bring a guest on the show, I'll do a 2 or 3 minute video where we get to see each other, because I want to see their environment a little bit. I want to see like what pictures they have on the walls, or, there might be a Yoda doll behind them, and it turned out that they're a big Star Wars person. That helps me direct a narrative of the show sometimes. So I go, oh, so you're a big Star Wars fan. How would George Lucas have done your blah, blah, blah? You know what I mean? So it makes for a fun conversation. But I'll always ask what they're promoting. I'll ask what their favorite social media channels are, so they have that. And then like how they would want their audience to find them. Because it's to me, for a guest, sometimes it feels like you've been brought into a party and someone goes, hey, why don't you introduce yourself? And you're like, hi, room full of strangers. I do this. Like, what do you exactly want from me right now? So the podcast is called the Solopreneur Hour. You can subscribe to that at solohour.com/iTunes. I've had a bunch of really cool people on, from Adam Carolla to famous musicians to comedians to you name it. All the socials is at Solo Hour. If you are a car person and you would like to support that end of my world, wrench.com/YouTube. In fact, even if you're not a car person, go to wrench.com/YouTube, because it automatically subscribes you. And you can just let it be in your YouTube that you never view anyway. Who cares? And then at Wrench on Instagram, RENNCH is where you can find me.
Awesome. So, knowing that a lot of listeners here are people starting out, or possibly even people who are established but just looking for those small tips and tricks to make adjustments. Do you have any last words for the listeners here today?
My last word would be almost my first word, which is almost patience. Patience is so critical. It can be such a slog to crank on content after content after. It's why most podcasts only last 7 episodes. It's a lot of work. So put blinders on and just do the next thing in front of you at a time, and get a coach if you can afford it. The people that I work with, I have a number of private coaching clients. They make more progress in a year than some people do in 5. It's critical to be a student of the game, whatever the game is that you want to do, whether it's video or audio, or it's very rare for me to go a day or two without watching another. I mean, certainly in the garage, I watch multiple a day on welding and fabricating and doing all the stuff I have to do. But like, I might be in looking at Final Cut Pro or Logic Pro ideas, because I use Final Cut to edit my videos. I use Logic Pro to edit my podcast. Be a student of the game. Learn your craft. Look outside of your industry. When you go, yeah, I've got a bunch of favorite podcasts and they don't do this. Well, I'll tell you that most podcasters are doing it wrong. So don't look at podcasters. Look at people that are paid millions of dollars to do the thing that you're trying to do, which is, in this case, host a show, or maybe be a presenter on YouTube. Look for the people that are pros and how they operate, and you can instantly do better in your industry than a lot of the people that might be your peers. And pretty soon you'll be the one walking around on stage and doing all those things. Awesome.
Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you so much for coming on here today and sharing your journey and sharing so much advice. Before I let you go, because I'm on a journey of self-development, self-improvement, things like that. And you've shared a ton of advice during this interview. I've taken notes to readjust some of the flow that I do. But, do you have any feedback for me based on, you being a guest, positive, constructive, just whatever? I like to catch that, on recording, because the people listening are, following my journey, as well as just seeing my growth and seeing where I make mistakes and I can improve from it. And I love to sort of share that along the way. So I'd love to get any kind of feedback that you would like to share.
Well, all right. So the feedback on just that one question you asked me right now, if you look back on the show we just did for an hour, would I have answered that question already multiple times? Like, what would you do based on our conversation now?
Yeah. So yeah, good question. So I would introduce the guest with having the last words being the guest's name, which I was aware of, just never really executed on. I would also, ask some of those questions right up front about asking the guests before the interview starts about where they're looking to get promoted, what they're working on right now, and what their preferred social platforms are, so that I could shout them out as opposed to asking the guests to shout them out.
So if it was just that,
so
here's the I think it's it's one of the chapters in my Art of the Interview course, which is ejecting from your questions. Just because you have a question written down doesn't mean you have to ask it, right? Sometimes it's a time constraint. Sometimes the question's already been answered, like in this case. Right. So you might have said, you might have framed this like, normally at the end of every show, I ask, because I'm on a journey, I'm trying to get better at this. I ask the guest this, but you've already given that feedback, and the feedback would be blank, blank, and blank, or anything else, and because so in my brain, when you ask me that, my initial instinct is to go, did he not listen to like anything I just said this whole time? Didn't we already cover this? But I know that's not like that wasn't with ill intent. I wouldn't think of it like that. Yeah. But that would be a major thing, being able to eject from your questions because they've already been answered. I was on a show once.
That's great.
We'd done an hour. It was great. We had this killer, flowing, amazing interview, right? And then he said, all right, now we're going to do whatever it was, the tornado round or the lightning round or whatever. And literally every single question he asked, we had already talked about on the show. And I went, man, this went from like an A+ show, and the last 10 minutes just dive bombed it. Like, it was just like, we had such good energy. He should have just gone, thanks for being on, let's roll. And then we would have just been that, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So being able to process the information that you're getting as a host and go, oh wait, I think we've already covered that. We don't need to, I'll skip that one. And maybe you've done that already, but otherwise, just that preparation is really the key. If for a podcaster who's doing any kind of interviewing or any interview whatsoever, to have that information in front of them is great. If you want great interview techniques, Sean Evans from Hot Ones is a monster. And I don't know, he does so much research on his guests that he digs deep. And then off camera with Sam Jones. Sam is a crusher when it comes to interview questions. Like, he deep dives, and he's been with these guests a lot of times for a really long time. Like, they've been in the same industry. And so he just asks these rich questions. And then my other current favorite is Dax Shepard. Dax Shepard does Armchair Expert. Those are my three. If you want to listen to great conversation, those are three great spots to listen to a great conversation. If you're a hobbyist, and if you're a host who wants to get better at hosting, great spots for technical savvy on how to really frame up a great show.
Awesome. Well, thanks for that. It's really helpful. And thanks again for taking your time today and sharing your journey and all this advice. Has been really helpful. And I know there's a lot of thank yous popping up here. So yeah.
Thanks guys. Thanks for listening. I've never been accused of brevity, so sorry if this one's longer than they are.
Yeah, I'm glad that I meant to. So that's another thing is I usually ask, is there a hard cutoff time? And I just realized, at the end I never asked you that, and then now here we are over an hour. But
my show's always an hour, so it's this is par for the course for me.
Cool. Well, thanks everyone for listening.
Shows with me always go longer than the host expects. So sorry.
Awesome.